Yes, we are very impressed with the new Vitara Brezza from Maruti Suzuki. It is our first look at the facelift and the new AMT on the Renault Duster. And we put all these SUVs into a slugfest. How does the Vitara take on its rivals? So how important is this car for the Indian car market? Very. How big a deal is it for Maruti Suzuki? That's a really big deal. And how much do you care about it? Well, going by social media, a whole lot. Welcome to the Car and Bike Show. I'm Siddharth Vinayak Parthankar. With us, the Vitara Brezza from Maruti Suzuki. It's the car that really sort of lit up the Auto Expo. You all wanted to see it. You all wanted to know more about it. You get all of that in our review. The first big SUV play from the market leader. Of course, the Vitara Brezza had to be a high decibel product, right? The car is a subcompact SUV and yet has the looks and proportions that belie that compact size. The face is attractive with a new look front grille pattern in black, embellished with a thick chrome strip that's a touch Honda-like. So Maruti says it very specifically went after very specific SUV styling elements on this car rather than go after like a crossover or a coupe-like look that you see from many other cars. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you the why in a second, but what I will say is that it was a very smart move because it makes the car look bigger than it really is. It doesn't look like a sub 4 meter car, it doesn't look subcompact. The elements, the reason it went after those, well, I'll tell you what the elements are. You have a slightly squarish appeal here on the wheel arch. The floating roof concept. Why floating? Well, essentially you have a separation between the roof and the rest of the car's paintwork, even in the car that has the same colored roof, not just the contrast roof. Though of course the contrast roof looks nice. With the yellow and the blue you get the white roof, with the red you get a black roof. It looks pretty cool, I have to say, and will certainly spark quite an interest in this segment when it comes to that kind of an element. And then you got the ground clearance. Is it the best in class? No, but it is right up there with most of the rivals at 198 millimeters. I'll tell you what, that stance really adds to that overall SUV appeal that I was talking about, which again contributes to making the car look bigger than it is. The optional two-tone look on the ZDI Plus really works, with the mirrors and roof playing off the bright yellow and blue paintwork very well. The red car comes with a black contrast roof option. The Vitara Brezza is the kind of car many buyers have been waiting for. Of course, many have already opted for a larger Duster or Creta, and others still have already bought the similar sized EcoSport or TUV 300. But I say that many are waiting because, well, they wanted to see what Maruti would bring to the party. So the Vitara Brezza is a sub 4 meter diesel powered SUV. That Maruti chose to stay diesel only with it was surprising, but given the sentiment shift towards petrol of late, Maruti has been quick to say that the petrol Vitara Brezza will arrive later in 2016. The diesel car has the now very familiar Fiat-derived 1.3 DDIS engine, but in an 89 bhp spec. The engine has a fair amount of lag though, and so it can be a bit annoying in city traffic with frequent gear changes, and it even stalled on me a couple of times. Maruti seems to have tuned it heavily towards efficiency, and so it lacks a sting like we've seen with the Swift, for instance. The mileage figure is an impressive 24.3 kilometers per litre that Maruti claims is class leading. Out on the open road is where the car belongs, because as you stay over 2000 RPM, the engine comes alive. It isn't noisy, overtakes on quick downshifts nicely, and cruises very comfortably at higher speeds too. The first impression you get when you begin driving the car is that this is almost like a Swift in heels. The Vitara Brezza does not handle like the Swift though, which is a lot sportier. The car feels a bit imprecise and lacks the sharpness that we've seen with the S-Cross and Baleno of late. It also lacks steering precision, which I felt was a bit of a letdown after the brilliant steering that we've seen on those recent cars. So alright, we've got through the bad bits. It's quite clear that handling could have been just a whole lot better, and I expected more from the steering too. But you know what? There is so much that comes in with the car that helps compensate for that it becomes a heartening story then. And what am I talking about? Well, the ride quality. The suspension and the work on that suspension from the Maruti Suzuki engineers has to be applauded. It's not something, by the way, that I expected coming into this. That's the one thing I thought that could be a letdown. Instead, it's the thing I'm perhaps most impressed with. Excellent work on the suspension, because the car has this really mature, solid feel to it. It definitely feels like Maruti knew what it was doing in this department. And the reason that comes through very well is that it's not a soft, mushy suspension just for comfort. You get a nice feel from it. It's got this sturdy sense as well. And yet it glides over potholes. It swallows pretty much anything that comes in the form of bad roads, and you'll get a great sense of comfort even sitting at the rear. So yeah, I think that's got to be the one clear USP on the Vitara Brezza. The gearbox is also good, and I think people would like to see an automatic on this car, though an AMT might be a bit clunky given the car's ride height and handling. I suspect Maruti would aim at the CVT on the future petrol Vitara Brezza and an AMT only on the diesel. The Vitara Brezza has a sharp and well-finished cabin. Plastics, fabric and other materials are subtle and classy. The material quality is good too, and you get a fair amount of equipment at the high end, including a cool box, reverse camera, big infotainment system screen with navigation, and yes, Apple CarPlay. You can hook up other non-Apple devices using the aux or USB in or Bluetooth of course. The Vitara Brezza brings in an appealing feature to buyers at this price point: mood lighting for the instrument cluster. There's an option of 5 colors that you can play with to change the look of the cluster: blue, orange, white, yellow or red. This is only on the ZDI and ZDI Plus though. The cabin isn't as roomy as the larger compact SUVs, but it'll serve a 4 or 5 member family well. The boot is 328 litres, but it can be extended by smartly folding down the rear seats to a fully flat floor. Maruti is offering a driver airbag as standard and the passenger airbag and ABS as optional, even on the base variant, which is very, very good. I had honestly expected Maruti Suzuki to get brutal with its rivals and severely undercut them with even more aggressive prices than what we've seen. But for the most part, the 6,99,000 rupees starting price has been very well received. Maruti Suzuki says it's received a whopping 5,600 bookings for the Vitara Brezza in the first 48 hours since launch. Safe to call it a hit? Oh yes. So that then is everything you wanted to know about the new Maruti Suzuki Vitara Brezza. It is diesel only. Remember, the petrol comes later in the year. And of course, your attention is going away from what I'm saying and it's going to this car. Yes, it is the facelifted Duster. It is the one you saw at the Auto Expo very briefly. And it is the one that brings in the new AMT variant into the Duster family. We do want to show you a few glimpses of this car, but it also brings up a very crucial point. When you talk about all these compact SUVs and that new Vitara Brezza, what's that rival list looking like for Maruti to deal with? We'll talk about all of that after a very short break right here on CNB. Welcome back to CNB. We are talking about the Maruti Suzuki Vitara Brezza in great detail this week, and you saw a glimpse of the new Duster just as we went into that break. Now, We of course have always wanted to bring you this right after that Expo debut, and so we'll have more details on the car and the full review for you on CNB Bazaar Buzz. That's Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. But the reason I also brought this car into this because, well, we're talking about compact SUVs and subcompact SUVs. This is the kind of consideration set that buyers would now be looking at. The Duster is definitely priced much higher than the Vitara Brezza is, but to the buyer, it doesn't matter about subcompact and compact. What are the kind of rivals that should come into that consideration set then? Well, you got the Duster and the Creta at the top end, and then you've also got the big one, the Ford EcoSport, that's just had a realignment in its prices and is looking more competitive than it did before. So now it's time to see how the Vitara Brezza compares with its main rivals. It needs to take on the Mahindra TUV 300, though that car doesn't necessarily have the exact same buyer, so the real direct competition comes in from the Ford EcoSport. The EcoSport arrived in mid-2013 and it was a runaway hit. While sales may have slowed down since, it remains a bestseller and quite the segment benchmark, with no real rival given the Creta, the Duster, the Terrano, well, they're all a segment bigger. The Premier Rio, Fiat Aventura and Hyundai i20 Active have tried to chip away at some of that though, but largely the EcoSport has held its own. And now suddenly we have the Mahindra TUV 300 and the Vitara Brezza driving in with some real competition. Ford has been hit by the Vitara Brezza launch for sure, and just a day after that launch has significantly repositioned the EcoSport with massive price cuts. That just spices up this shootout further really. So let's take this head to head between that benchmark and the new contender. So what do you know, it's a bit of a surprise. Before putting these two cars together, I was convinced that the Vitara Brezza is just going to look so much more SUV-like, and guess what? The EcoSport's the one that's actually taller and manages to hold its own in terms of proportion. But see how different both these cars are. They have a different sense of styling completely. Yes, this is taller, but yes, this one has the SUV proportion. How do they compare in terms of actual dimensions? Let's run that comparison for you now. The EcoSport is a mere 4mm longer and its wheelbase is 20mm longer than the Vitara Brezza's. It is also taller at 1708 mm. The Maruti model is wider by 25mm though. On boot space, the EcoSport stays just ahead. Next up, let's look at the two cabins. The EcoSport gets upright and taller seating and has a busy yet functional central console. The small digital screen at the top of that though isn't great, but the car has sync voice command and the unique emergency assist function. The top end also gets side and curtain airbags, but the base version has neither ABS nor any airbags. The Vitara Brezza's cabin is not as modern looking, but certainly feels roomier and has a good finish. The top end gets the large touchscreen with navigation and that reverse camera. There's also Apple CarPlay to boot. The car has driver side airbag standard with ABS and the passenger airbag being offered as an option right from the base trim, remember. Both cars have push button start stop and keyless entry. Now let's get this show on the road. I am driving the EcoSport first. So it was a bit of a masterstroke from Ford, taking the really capable, really popular and a really taut Fiesta platform. That hatchback has done so well for Ford globally, and then turning it into the EcoSport. The downside, of course, when you do anything like this is that you're taking something that's really congruous and then you're raising the height and you're sort of making things a little unnatural, which goes away from the original design. The good news is that Ford got that part together really well too, and so which is why this car handles beautifully. Every Ford car, as compared to some of the Japanese or the Korean cars, that's the thing we always say, right? That it just handles very precisely. Well, of course, when you compare these two cars as well, the thing that comes forward is just how beautifully this car handles. It goes where you want it to go, the steering is really precise, and it gives you this really pleasurable sense of driving, which is very hatch-like. And frankly, from a pure driving delight point of view, that is a good thing. Now onto the Vitara Brezza. So they're like chalk and cheese then, these two, when it comes to handling. They're so different in their appeal, and in a sense that's a good thing because it's nice that they're both individual in that sense. This car is probably the chalk in that comparison. You know, a lot of people like cheese, but hey, you could be one of those kids in school who used to eat chalk, so I'm not going to judge. But the point is that they're very different. And while the EcoSport clearly wins the handling sweepstakes, there is something to be said about the ride quality on this car. I mean, I come back to that point now because it has to be said. It is that one aspect which is going to give people a lot of reassurance. It's going to make this car feel bigger and a little more imposing, and also possibly more comfortable for the other occupants, not just the driver, especially on longer drives. So it looks like the two cars each have their clear merits, and this is what it boils down to. If you want a pure driver's car, there is no doubt the EcoSport remains the clear favorite. Its retaining that benchmark and its delightful handling and dynamic control help it stay ahead. The fact that Ford has now completely realigned the positioning of the EcoSport by slashing prices by over $1 lakh on all diesel variants certainly helps make it a better value proposition too. Before Ford cut prices, the Vitara Brezza was a definite winner on value alone. But now that's changed somewhat. So if you like to be pampered with more equipment and also a comfortable chauffeur experience, then the Vitara Brezza has to still be your pick. It is also the better family car despite having a slightly smaller boot. So if that's the kind of car you need, the Vitara Brezza becomes the winner. So what about that other big potential rivalry everybody was talking about before the Vitara Brezza broke cover at the Auto Expo? Well, I can tell you, we put the two cars together just to answer that question emphatically enough. Are they rivals? No, they're not. This is sub 4 meter. It is a subcompact SUV. This one's a compact SUV. There's not a huge difference between them, but while I still believe that Hyundai can't really justify the premium price tag on the Creta, it certainly has enough going for it to qualify as a different segment, and so which is why we don't think it's right to really put these two in the same segment. There could be cars that the same buyer considers, but in terms of pricing, where the Vitara Brezza ends off is pretty much where the diesel Creta starts. Now, this comparison applies more to the Hyundai Creta than that new Renault Duster that we've just showed you. The Creta is definitely larger and roomier on the inside as compared to the Vitara Brezza, but in terms of shape and even exterior dimensions, it isn't massively different from it. And let's not forget that many buyers who are thinking of buying a Creta will now see the Vitara Brezza, consider all that it offers, and of course its much lower prices. So yes, I think the Creta will also suffer. Not because it's like the Vitara Brezza, but because it isn't. So lots of action then with the subcompact and compact SUVs. That entire space is burning red hot, and it's going to stay like that for a while. So please react to what you've seen. I can tell you that the price revision from Ford has actually helped in a sense because it's a nice distinction between the subcompact and compact space, which means there could be room for more competition as well. Remember, Jeep launches its compact SUV that's made in India sometime next year. So like I said, things will continue to stay hot there for a while. Next week on the program, we'll bring you the big new bold move from Bajaj. That's the V brand, and the first product, the V15, is something we're going to review for you on the program next week. Remember, there's a nice heritage connect there with the Vikrant Warship. We'll tell you more about that, and of course, more crucially, how that bike rides. That's on CNB next week. Please remember to wear your helmet when you're on a two-wheeler. Please wear your seat belts when you're in a car, front or back. I will see you next week. Goodbye.